Hey there world, I'm the Courageous Goldfish, and my wallet hurts so much. If you are at all involved in the figure collecting community, it is no surprise to you that the prices have been increasing drastically recently. Regular standard freeing B styles are going for 33,000 yen. 33,000 for a freeing bunny! And while collectors never want to pay extortionate pricing, sometimes you just have to swallow that pill and click that pre-order button anyways. But it's been on my mind recently. How do I justify these crazy prices that I'm paying for these hunks of plastic? Because there are a lot of anime figures out there, so you gotta really pick and choose what's really going to be the most important for you to try and keep your budget as close in line as possible. And especially with these ballooning prices, it's just getting harder and harder, and so today I'm gonna go through all the little tips and tricks of how I decide to pre-order things or not. Disclaimer! This is what works for me. It might not work for everybody and it might not be the soundest of advice, but this is what I do to decide whether or not it's going to be actually worth it to pre-order something, or if I should maybe just wait or just not get it at all, that kind of thing. So this first tip that I have relates directly to drafts. So most figure collectors have their eyes on stuff before it goes up for pre-order, and so if you've got stuff you're kind of interested in, stuff you think you might end up buying, this is a tip that directly relates to that. Take for example the 1/6 scale Pet Girlfriend by Good Smile Company. I have been looking at this figure, I'm very interested in purchasing it. I think that the source art is great, I think the prototype turned out really nicely. Obviously still waiting on paintwork to see if it's actually something that I will want to purchase. But when it comes to things like this that I've got my eyes on, I try to kind of anticipate what the pricing might be for it, and also kind of give myself a budget in my head of how much I'm willing to pay for a certain figure. Obviously you have to inform yourself of market prices, how much similar things are going for, just the figure prices in general going up. You have to have a reasonable budget expectation. But for me personally, where I would tap out with this figure is if it's above 27,000 yen. That's kind of where I'm thinking for this, mostly because my Urza B style is about that much for a quarter scale. And I just don't see myself wanting to pay anything more than bunny prices for this one. Who knows, maybe I might break down and I don't know. But in my mind, I've set this budget for myself of okay, this is how much I'm willing to pay for this. If it's more than that, I won't pre-order it. And that's what happened with the 1/6 scale 15th anniversary Strawberry Miku. Absolutely gorgeous. I love her. It's everything I love about a Miku figure. I have my Snow Miku over here, who is one of my prized possessions in my collection, the crown jewel of my collection. And I just know that I would love and cherish that Strawberry Miku, but I set a budget and I said I'm not going to pay any more than X price for the Strawberry Miku, and the Strawberry Miku ended up being more than that, and so I didn't pre-order it. So while she is an amazing and stunning piece, and I absolutely love her and would have pre-ordered her instantly if she was within that budget constraint, I just can't justify it to myself to pay that much more on top of what I already said was the limit. You know what I mean? Personally, I've started to take into consideration, okay, I really like this figure, but am I going to absolutely hate myself for paying that much for it? And that's the other question, is where is the worth there for you? And that's gonna be different for every collector, I think. It honestly depends on what you collect, what you're interested in, anything like that. You're gonna have your own frame of reference for how much you're willing to pay for something. But I think a lot of the times in this hobby, thinking about, okay, is the price that I'm paying worth it or reflective of what I am receiving in return, either emotionally or just in general with this hunk of plastic, right? There is also huge FOMO in this hobby, and so that has kind of helped me to beat that a little bit, because it's okay, well, I already said this is the tippity top of what I'll pay for it. It's more than that, therefore no. And this is not infallible logic either. There's definitely going to be times where I'll go, oh, this is more than I thought it was going to be, or like more than I was wanting to pay for it, but I love it so much that I'll just do it. But this is kind of one of the things that helps me to keep in my lane of like, okay, this is reasonable and this is doable for me with my budget. Another thing too is what I call need versus want. Obviously, all figures are a want because you don't need them to survive. However, in the frame of reference of supporting an anime collection, I've started to really try and think very critically about a figure, whether or not I really feel like it's perfect for my collection, I love everything about it, versus like, oh, I just think it's cool, or like the design is cool, or I like the character, that kind of thing. Obviously, the most obvious example of me not following this is my Urza collection, because it's actually kind of out of hand and I'm a little bit afraid for November. Yeah, for the most part, I've been really just trying to think critically about, okay, where does this fit in my collection? Is this something that I'll love forever or just for 6 months? Is this something that I really feel like I love and really need to have in my collection? Or is it something that people are really excited about, therefore I'm more hyped about it? Or is this something that I feel like I have a fear of missing out on? I really try to dissect what it is about the figure that makes me want to pre-order it, and if it's something that I can justify, if it's something that's like, okay, I really like this figure because this, and that, and I feel like I need it in my collection because this, and that, there's more justification for me to pre-order it. For example, I really love Kento Nanami from Jujutsu Kaisen, but I haven't bought any Jujutsu Kaisen figures yet because I just don't really like any of them. The one that's got the closest for me is the Mega House Nanami. I actually do quite like that one, even though I did kind of hit on it in another video I made, but the paint turned out really good and I actually think he's one of my favorite Nanamis. However, I am on a budget constraint currently because my pre-orders for the next couple of months are really heavy, and so I thought to myself, you know what, I like this and I want to have it, but I don't need it because where in my collection does it really fit? Nah. Is it something that I really love? Not really. I just like it menially. Like, I would be cool to have it, but it's not like I'm crushed if I don't, you know what I mean? And so that's the reason why I chose not to pre-order that one, because, you know, in context of what I have coming, and then also in context of knowing myself and knowing my collection and knowing what I want for it and like the vision that I have, it just didn't make the cut. And that's not to say I'll never end up with this figure ever. I still do really like it. If he goes down on the aftermarket or if I get a good opportunity to purchase him, I might do that. I think when it comes to this hobby, people get too caught up in anticipating what they might like instead of purchasing stuff that they really love in the moment and making sure that it's something that is going to be a lasting impact on their collections, instead of just like, oh well, I might like that in the future, or like, I might regret not pre-ordering that one, so I'll just pre-order it just in case. There is nothing wrong with doing it that way. But the reason why I don't do it that way anymore is because of that. I don't want to be trying to anticipate what I will be interested in or trying to anticipate regrets that I might have. Stick to what you love, stick to what you feel like you really need in your collections, and I feel like you'll be a lot happier for it. But I hear you saying, I've done all this already and I still have way too many pre-orders. How do I fix it? Well, that's a slippery slope. However, I do have a little bit of advice for you. If you've run into a spot where you really just cannot justify what your pre-orders are, if you can't afford them, or if it's a stretch for you, or if you're just not comfortable with how much you're laying down, that's totally valid, and that's where you need to kick in the prioritization. That is a lovely word that basically means pick your favorites. I'm gonna bring up this example not because it's situationally relevant. I am not canceling any of these, unfortunately, but I'm just bringing it up to be an example to explain what I mean by this. I have 3 Urza scales on pre-order right now. Relatively expensive Urza scales too, and so if you are really feeling crushed under the weight of your pre-orders right now, you should probably try and really take a look at your things and prioritize. What are your favorite ones? What are the ones that you could maybe do without? What are the ones that you just can't justify, right? That kind of thing. If I were to take these 3 scales, I could probably go, okay, well, my favorite one of them is this one, and I really, really want this one, and if I want to be able to have this one, I have to cancel the other 2, right? Not saying that's my situation. Unfortunately, it's not. I'm gonna be paying for all 3 of these, which is gonna hurt my wallet. But if you have 3 of those and you go, okay, this one is my favorite, and in order to attain this one, you need to ixnay the other 2. That's fine. The other thing about that too is that you're probably just gonna end up with stuff that you really, really love, which ties back into my second point of need versus want. But then if you run into the problem of like, well, I really, really, really love all of the things I have on pre-order, I don't want to cancel any of them. This last sub-point of the prioritization kind of leads us into the 4th point. If you have gotten to a point where all of your pre-orders are stuff you really, really, really love and you don't want to cancel any of it and you have to make some tough calls, I would recommend that you try and anticipate aftermarket prices when you're making your decisions. So for example, in a month, if you really need to cut down on your pre-orders and you have a freeing bunny pre-ordered and a couple of other little scales, right? My thought process would be to prioritize the freeing bunny because freeing bunny fishnets go crazy on the aftermarket. It's kind of a general rule that if you don't get in while the getting's good, you're probably going to get stuck paying upwards of $500 for a bunny figure. It's just absolutely insane. The aftermarket on those things is absolutely ridiculous. So you might want to situationally go, okay, well, it's better for me in the long run if I prioritize this bunny right now, and then try and maybe find the scales later on the aftermarket, purchase them secondhand, anything like that. Which leads us into our 4th point of anticipating the aftermarket, which is really tough. And really, obviously, there's no foolproof way to figure out like, oh, this figure's gonna cost a lot and go really up, or this figure's gonna bin and it's gonna cost less, or like this figure's gonna keep its value and stay like at its retail. There's no way to tell, there's no way to know, but there are clues that can give you a bit of a prediction of what it might end up being. There are a lot of factors that go into trying to anticipate what an aftermarket might be on a figure, and sometimes you really just cannot tell. Sometimes things that should have cost less or stayed the same have just gone up for no reason. Demand can be high and supply can be short. It's impossible to try and figure out those kind of things with any kind of certainty. But with context clues and past precedents, you can kind of start to formulate a prediction of what the aftermarket might be for a certain figure. It can be really difficult to predict, but there are a couple of things that you should be looking at to try and kind of get a prediction of what something might cost. The first thing I usually like to look at when I'm trying to anticipate an aftermarket for a figure is like the series that it's from or like what character it is. So for example, Rem from ReZero, obviously we know some Rem figures can go crazy. I'm looking at you, Crystal Dress Rem. But because there are just so many figures of Rem and so many ReZero figures, a lot of the times you're going to be able to find these pretty readily on the aftermarket for decent prices that are close or lower than retail. So if the figure that you're looking at is more of a Rem type of a figure, then it might be a little bit safer for you to just cancel that one and come back to it later. However, on the flip side, I've been really going back and forth about pre-ordering this Good Smile Company Wiz figure because I absolutely love Wiz from Konosuba, and Konosuba does get quite a few figures, so you would think that on the aftermarket it wouldn't be too bad. However, this is the first and only Wiz figure, and so I'm a little bit afraid of it being the only one we ever get and then her just going like zoop, because everybody wants Wiz in their collections. So there's definitely a fine balance of trying to figure out if you're willing to take the risk on the aftermarket, I suppose. The type of figure really comes into it as well, as we were talking about earlier with the freeing bunnies. Those kind of things, I'm terrified of bunny aftermarket, I'm not gonna lie. At this point, in my mind, psychologically, I either pre-order the bunny and get it on release, or I just never get it at all. And I'm not even really that much of a bunny person in the first place, and so, you know, it kind of terrifies me, to be honest, to think about having to go to the aftermarket for a bunny. Horrifying. You can also look at past precedent too. So if your figure is a part of a set, you can look at like the aftermarkets for the set, that kind of thing. Like for example, I really like the Darkness and the Aqua Oiran versions. And I was really considering pre-ordering Aqua because I thought this is a great figure, everybody's gonna want her. But the aftermarket for the other two in this set is pretty decent, and so I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna take my chances and I'll buy it when I'm ready. This is not infallible logic. I hope that I won't look back on this video and go, you should have just pre-ordered it. But sometimes you have to make those judgment calls, and that's an important part of figure collecting and budgeting. So another important part of aftermarket anticipation is what type of figure is it that you're looking at? Is it just a basic scale? Or like we talked about before, Freeing Bunny aftermarket is just absolutely insane. So you really have to think about the type of figure, or like I know those super action statues, like the JoJo super action statues, those ones go crazy on the aftermarket sometimes as well. So you just kind of have to look at like the line of figure and the past precedent for similar things. I know it can be kind of difficult because there's no like concrete, like this is gonna cost more or like this is gonna bin. But with these kind of things, if you think about it logically, if you bring in similar things and compare, you should be able to get a general idea of what's gonna go up or what's gonna stay the same or what might bin a little bit. So just, I'm not sure how to end this segment really. You gotta take your gamble, and you have to be okay with taking that gamble. Another really important part can be whether or not a figure is exclusive or if it's a re-release. If it's a re-release, that tells you that it was really, really high in demand, so much so that the figure companies were like, okay, let's bring it out again. People were really interested in this and they like it a lot, therefore we'll do it again. So when it's a re-release, I think I would be more inclined to keep that pre-order rather than cancel it just in case. But again, it all depends on your specific situation, how much you like the figure, how much you need it, that kind of thing. But it's just something to think about when you're trying to anticipate how much something might cost on the aftermarket. Or if it's exclusive to something like the Aniplex exclusive Marin, you know, that's gonna be a little bit more highly sought after because it's not as widely available, that kind of thing. So you really, the big part of this point is you really just have to contextually look at other figures and other similar things and try your best to anticipate whether or not something is going to be more difficult to find later. Great part is that the anime figure aftermarket is generally pretty friendly. I know we all get really terrified with like our grails and stuff like that. There are obviously some figures that are just absolutely crazy on the aftermarket, but for the most part, like there are so many figures out there, it's impossible that all the ones you want are gonna go like whoop. So sometimes it's a little bit better to put it down for now and come back to it later, if that makes sense. I'm doing that with a lot of things right now actually because A, I either just can't justify it, or B, again, my pre-orders are super duper heavy for winter. Oh, one little tip that I do have for you though is don't pre-order prize figures. I've learned this so many times that they are almost always cheaper on Mandarake after the fact. Prize figures do not hold value. Some prize figures hold value. Recent prize figures, if it's within the last like couple years or so, they don't. They're dirt cheap on Mandarake. Don't pre-order prize figures, wait for them to be cheaper on the aftermarket. Like for example, I really considered purchasing the Prince Endymion and Princess Serenity Q-Posket set, but anywhere I could find to pre-order them, they were about like $30 US each, and I was like, nah, I can't really justify that. Right now on Mandarake, they are 10,000 yen each, which is about 10 bucks, so I could get the set for 20, which is less than it would have cost me to buy one. And so I think that, especially when it comes to prize figures, wait it out, just see. Most of the time they do go lower on the aftermarket, and that can be a better pickup for you. Also, for example, the Fluffy Puffy Luna, she was adorable and I really wanted her too, but she's not very tall and she was $30 as well, US. I'm Canadian, so that exchange rate really hurts. And right now she is about 1,500 yen on the aftermarket. So just wait it out, see, maybe it'll be a better price. That's not always the case with scale figures, but with prize figures in specific, usually they will go down. We can still enjoy this hobby. There is nothing stopping you from collecting your own way, but if you are feeling stressed out about your pre-orders or stressed out about just how many figures you love, this can be a really great way to try and kind of like pare it down to just the essentials, if you will. I know for me personally, that has really helped me out a lot because I, again, have really heavy pre-orders for the next coming months, and so I was like, oh my god, like, terrified. I think the budgeting aspect of figures is less so talked about than the, oh, hey, here's this new figure, let me cut open the box and like the blister and everything. Ooh, shiny new thing, right? I think that thinking about the longevity of your collection and thinking really critically about what it is that you're buying is something that's really overlooked in this community. And so I just kind of wanted to make a video talking about how I do it, my sort of like process of how I justify things. So hopefully this helped you out. And of course, there is no saying you have to take my advice either. I just thought that this might be something kind of fun to talk about. But anyways, that is all I have for you guys today. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you're interested in me, hey, hi, hello, there is a subscribe button down below if you're interested in joining the channel. But of course, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.